Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. I'm Steve Gibson.
And I'm fucking tired. Let's go.
Yeah. That's the MO though. Every week,
Every week we're tired, but like this, I did not sleep well at all for some reason. For some reason, it's like once the weather starts getting better, like my nights just go to shit. And it's like, I'm rolling around and hey, it's 11 a.m. I don't have to be up at 2 at all.
I was the exact same way last night. Well, I can't say exact same way because I don't think I'm nearly as tired as you are, but it's just something. Well, we always put something on TV to fall asleep to, and our fucking PSN was out yesterday. I don't know if it was my Wi-Fi or what. At midnight, like I really lose the interest to like investigate technical issues.
Yeah.
And for some reason,
I'll just die here, I guess.
I was like, we were about to just turn it off, but Tara really likes to have something on TV. And so I was like, well, I'll just like go to the DVD play menu and hit that and see if there's something in here. And there was Horton Hears a Who, the greatest movie ever made, I guess. Not really. But so we turned that on. Well, she didn't turn. Normally she'll turn like the timer on so it automatically turns off after like an hour. And apparently she didn't
watch all of it.
I fell asleep at some point, and then I woke up and like I kept hearing who fucking plays Horton in that? Jim Carrey. And I just kept hearing the same like scream from him, and I'm like, God, that's lazy. They're obviously reusing the same like scream over and over. And then finally I rolled over and opened my eyes and looked, and it was at the like play menu, just repeating over and over and over again. I'm like, no wonder.
Like, I used to do that a lot. Now I watch shit on YouTube until I turn it off and fall asleep. But like, I used to rewatch movies all the time. Like, and one of my favorite movies was and it still is Shot in the Dark. It's one of the Pink Panther movies. It's the second original Pink Panther.
Shot in the dark in your tube.
Yeah, that's the theme song. No, but like on the DVD menu for it, it plays the Pink Panther tune really loud. Like it's so much louder than the actual movie. Yeah. So
that's how this menu system was. I don't know why they do that.
Because they can't fucking balance audio to save their life. And I'm one to talk, I guess. But so you're just like, at 3 a.m. it's like and it's like, oh my God.
Everybody in your house is like, I'm gonna fucking kill him.
Yeah, I was like, how did nobody like come and just like completely fucking chew my ass out for not turning this off?
Yeah, kick your door in and then throw your computer out the window.
Because I'm somebody who's like, I'll hear an alarm like on the other end of the house. Somebody's alarm clock goes off and they don't hear it and they're asleep. And this has been true all my life. And I get up and I start pounding on their door like, fuck, I shouldn't be waking up to your shit. But yeah.
Anyway,
but yeah, so like I got 3 hours of sleep and then like all day I've been really sharp. Like I went to work, felt wide awake, was just, honestly, it was probably the best work I've ever done at my job. Because like I called my boss, I told her like, hey, you don't have to come in until so-and-so time. I got this. And then I did. I actually had it. I didn't fuck a million things up like I thought I was going to.
Then you ran out of cocaine.
And then the fucking bumps wore off. And here we are. So anyway, welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. Every week, me and Steve get together, tell each other stories, fact, fiction, blah, 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 do. And this week, I'm kind of surprised we never really touch on the American Revolution too much in the history of the show. I don't think
we really have at all, yeah.
Yeah, and my topic does tap into that a little bit. It's a bit of a shorter one, but it's shorter because I realized that a lot of the main players in the American Revolution, at least the most interesting ones, their stories sort of start and stop in the American Revolution.
It's like the war was over and they went back to cobbling.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you can follow George Washington and shit, but it's not exactly, it's not good fodder for what we do here. So we're going to talk about a British major today, Major John André. John André was born in London to a family of wealthy Huguenots, which is one of my favorite words, and I didn't even realize it until this week.
Jason and the Huguenots.
Supposedly a pretty smart student, Andre picked up several languages which he spoke fluently. He loved theater and wrote his own short plays. He also attended St. Paul's and Westminster schools in England before finishing his education in Geneva. And all of these things are the types of bragging that I just sort of nod at if you tell me. Like
that's the funny thing. Like, you could have a really shitty school in England and just call it like,
the Grantchester School,
right? And you'd be like, oh, okay, cool.
Yeah, the Grantchester of higher learning.
And Leicestershire.
Yeah, Worcestershire. Like what you think Worcestershire sauce sounds like.
That's where they go to learn how to make it. But anyway.
Yeah, but it's like, I have no idea what the fuck any of these schools mean, and it's not even like a country thing, because if you tell me you studied at Harvard, I'll still just stare at you blankly. Anyway, in 1770, he joined the British Army, and just before the American Revolution kicked off, he was captured during the Americans' ill-advised and aborted campaign in the winter of 1775.
That's really special to be like, just before the war started, he got captured.
Yeah. Well, because Americans, they kind of jumped the gun. We were super eager to start this revolution, but not everyone was ready at once.
That sounds like America, yeah.
So that, the 1775 campaign, that was just more like, hey, can we capture a British major? Turns out we could.
Got him.
But he was paroled and exchanged, and apparently being made a prisoner before war started is a very commendable thing. So in 1777, he was promoted to captain of the 26th Foot.
That also seems counterintuitive.
Wow, what a soldier. But you start to, when you're reading up on it, you start to realize why. Andre was a pretty easily liked guy, a very sociable person. Colonists and British officers alike enjoyed his charm. So even when his unit occupied Philadelphia and New York, like, people were like, hey, this guy knows how to take a city over. He's all right. But while he was in Philly, he caught the eye of a Margaret Peggy Shippen, who was the daughter of a wealthy loyalist, but you would probably recognize her more as the wife of Benedict Arnold.
Cool.
But it's also suspected that before this and during her time as Mrs. Arnold, she was also taking Andre as a lover on the side. That's not confirmed, but it's highly possible.
Like, yeah. Cheating and whatever, double whatever ran in the family. It was...
Yeah. Well, in 1779, Andre was still moving up the ranks and became major and, this word fucks me up every time, adjutant general of the North American British Army. And by April of that year, he was head of the Secret Service. And I guess, like any good Secret Service agent, you start to use your connections for advantages in this conflict. And in 1780, no doubt through his relationship with Peggy Shippen, he was able to get that famous disgruntled American general to correspond with him. Benedict Arnold felt betrayed by the Congress and was disgusted with the direction the war was heading in. And eventually Arnold and Andre worked out a meeting where Arnold would essentially give up his command of the West Point garrison for an amount of money that would be around $3 million today.
Seems fair.
This would have been a big coup for the British, as West Point control would have isolated New England entirely from the other colonies. And then everything just went fucking wrong for Andre. First, he took his ship, the Vulture, to a spot near Haverstraw, New York, where Arnold was to meet him. They were going to send rowboats out to pick up Andre, row him back to shore, meet with Arnold, and then he was supposed to go back to the ship. On land, Andre and Arnold's meeting ran too long, no doubt due to a good lot of, "You fucking my wife" type chatter. And the vulture was hanging out in the water a little too long, and it caught the attention of American soldiers nearby, who promptly began firing on the vulture, forcing the ship to flee.
So it's just like those fucking Assassin's Creed games that we always make fun of, where if it sits there, there's like a bar that fills up, and it's like, oh,
Right.
nope, you waited too long.
Yeah, except this probably was a meeting that probably should have taken maybe, a half an hour at best, and from the sounds of it, it was like they just kept fucking jabbering, not realizing you're in a war. So Andre was now stranded behind enemy lines, and Arnold couldn't really do anything to help him besides give him some civilian clothes and papers detailing the weak points of West Point. From there, Andre had to make his own way out of this occupied area over land back to the British. And apparently he did pretty well up until he got to Terrytown, where he ran into a group of soldiers he for some reason mistook as British sympathizers. Though he quickly realized that wasn't the case, apparently his greeting roused their suspicions too much. It doesn't say what exactly he greeted them with, but I imagine it was something like, "Yeah, kingship, baby, all day, every day. What happening?" It's like...
I was hoping it was something like, "Cheerio, governor. I mean, hey, dudes, what's up?
Man, Americans suck. What's happening?" The soldiers searched him and found the West Point plans in his boot. He was flat out busted, and unlike some of our other stories, there's no like, we have like guys who get out of prison like 3 times and shit. Like, he's just fucked at this point. But he almost got out of it when the military leaders planned to send him to Benedict Arnold for imprisonment.
No, don't send me there.
Andre, no, I heard he was the fiercest general you have. No. But a newcomer, a Major General Benjamin Tallmadge, had heard that an American general had turned traitor. There was some rumors going around. And while nobody knew for sure which one had, he was able to convince the other military men to hold off on sending Andre to Arnold. He did have to send a letter to Arnold explaining the situation, however, and when Arnold got the letter, he got the fuck out of Dodge, knowing that his treason was on the cusp of being revealed.
Don't tell anybody, but we think there's a general that's a traitor.
Yeah, basically. Now, you'll hear different versions about how the rest of this played out, depending on how, like, macho badass the writer wants to make George Washington sound, where he's like this no-nonsense, kill-all spies type.
He grabbed his not AK, that's not American, the M15 or
right.
M16, whatever, and hatchet.
But the situation was actually a little more complex than that, from what I've gathered anyway. Congress was the entity that made it clear that all spies would be hanged. Like, this was something they decided. It wasn't George Washington's mandate. And Washington himself actually seemed to be trying everything he could to not put Andre to death. So while they had him and were trying to figure out what to do, over on the British side, they did not believe Americans would dare execute a British general, as there was this kind of mutual agreement that generals would only be taken prisoner and not executed. It didn't really say anything if the general was engaged in spying,
right,
which was a little bit different. And certainly British expectations of American ideas of honor never came back to bite them in the ass in this war. Cause it's the big talking point, but we didn't win shit, but the revolution was won pretty much entirely because we decided, like, hey, we're not going to win if we march onto a field with drums and shit. Like, we have to, like, fight dirty. And again, people liked Andre. He was still, even in his predicament, he was charming, and he was handling his situation with an admirable calm. He did try to make the case that he wasn't spying and that he had a right to try to escape by any means once he was trapped behind enemy lines. But once the court of inquiry determined that he was guilty of spying, he sort of just accepted that. All he did afterwards was, at best, send a plea deal to Washington that he be shot and not hanged, as the British considered it, being shot was a gentleman's death.
That's interesting. Like, imagine that were given that choice. Like, we're going to kill you. Do you want to be hanged or shot? I'd be like, no.
Just won't answer. It's like, fuck it, hang him and then shoot him. So no, I'd rather be shot, I think. You get me in the head. There's no
guarantee that kills you right away, but neither does the hanging.
Right, and to me, it's like, maybe your neck. It's a fucked situation anyway, but I feel like part of you would feel your neck breaking just a bit more than you would feel like the gunshot.
That's probably true. I bet there's so much shock. Like, it's so sudden with the gunshot that...
Then again, they're using fucking musket balls and shit that probably hit
curve.
Your forehead and bounce off. They have to shoot you 3 times in the exact same spot.
Yeah, there'd be a misshapen musket ball and it hooks and it hits you in like the crotch and you still bleed to death, but the whole time you're like, my junk.
Yeah, I don't know. There's no right answer here.
No.
The only question is, are you a gentleman or not?
I am not. I'd be kicking and screaming and trying to get every way.
Then you would be hanged, sir. But like I said, Washington wasn't really interested in André. He wanted the guy who gave André the plans. André was doing what probably anyone in his position would have done with the opportunity, and pretty much just got caught in the wrong place at the wrong time. Washington really wanted Arnold to hang, and was even reaching out to the British to make an exchange straight up for André to Arnold. I can only assume it's because the British never believed the Americans would go through with the execution that such an exchange never occurred. Because it's like the life of some American traitor who probably has some useful info behind enemy lines, but he also got one of your best military leaders caught. And like, you're comparing that to the same life of that military leader, even if, he did kind of bumble his way into his predicament. It's like, which is more valuable?
Right.
But either way, they decided they're not going to make a fucking deal. They didn't really do anything to help their guy. And the Americans, say what you will about us, but when we say we're going to kill someone, we aren't bullshitting.
That's like the one thing we're good at.
It's the one thing we keep our promises about.
We won't pay you back. We
won't pay you back. We won't help you. We won't elevate those around us, but we will murder someone.
If we say we're going to kill you, we'll do it.
And we'll kill 20 people who are around that person. Anyway, so age 31, André was hanged as a spy at Tappan, New York on October 2nd, 1780. And it said even his enemies mourned him, which tells you war is really stupid when everybody's like, we like this guy, but we got to kill him.
We got to do it.
Yeah. The other, I think, major takeaway is don't make deals with a guy if you're fucking his wife. Like André's...
Yeah. Yeah, I'd like to think that the whole swap went down perfectly, and he's about to turn to leave, and he's like, "Oh, tell your wife I said hi."
Yeah.
And Arnold was like, "I fucking knew it."
Did like the fucking creep smell my finger thing to him, and it just started a fight. That's why it took so long. They were just fighting.
Do you recognize this sense?
It's fucking gross. And also probably what happened, because André's is this sort of amusing, sad story of fuck-ups and mishaps, but there's this totally paranoid part of my brain man, Arnold really probably fucked this dude over.
He sounds so likable. What probably happened is Arnold was like, "Man, you're such a good guy. You should probably sleep with my wife." And he's like, "Funny story.
Take my wife, please."
He's like, "Now that you mention it, I guess I can go ahead and tell you I have been."
Nah, not interested. No. Anyway, André is remembered as a hero in England. A monument was built in his honor in the Heroes' Corner of Westminster Abbey, where his remains were brought for reburial in 1821. There was another monument built in 1879 on the site of his execution where Washington's quote about the man was inscribed. Washington said, "He was more unfortunate than criminal, an accomplished man, and a gallant officer."
That's a shitty quote because it goes back to what you said. It's like where everybody's like, man, I really wish there was something we can do. It's
right.
Like, yeah, don't
like
kill
you
him.
could not kill him. Like, I don't know. I kind of, reading that story, it's like, you know, I don't understand how everybody can be in agreement that, like, well, we like the dude, and we all would have done the same thing.
Yeah, his crimes really weren't that bad, but
Congress said
rules are rules.
And it just makes you, like, it makes you realize that, like, from the beginning of this country, our systems were really stupid.
Yeah.
And we just sort of go along with all of it. So on that depressing
note... I've been thinking
note,
about that. We were talking about, would you be shot or hung? What if you had time, like, typical now, you see guys in prison on death row, and you've got, like, years before they execute you. I'd say hung, and then every day I'd go into the weight yard and, like, lift weights with my neck.
just tying like weights around your neck and like going up and down, like your back is fucking ruined. But
they're like, we can't get the noose around this guy.
He doesn't have a neck. He's like a wrestler on steroids.
That'll show him.
It's just
and
like,
it used to be if you survived the hanging, and it was like taken as a sign that, like, okay, like you get to live. But
that's how they decided, like, fuck, can't get the rope on him, I guess you're free to go.
Well, not that part, but I mean, there's lots of stories of people that were supposed to be executed, and the execution didn't kill him, and they're like, well, that's it, he lives. Like,
that's what
I don't know about, like, the Revolution in particular. I know in the Old West that happened, but
it's like that fucking old movie, The Seventh Seal, where, like, death shows up and you play chess with him, like, you know, so they, like, inject you play chess with death, you win, technically you survived the death penalty, congratulations, right. Go back to life, you know. Yeah, I know
that. Yeah, it's also funny to me that the British, like, built a memorial and made him a hero for war, because it seems like his two major accomplishments were getting captured before the war started and then getting captured after the war started.
Yeah, but he was so nice, you know, and he spoke so many languages.
But he was a gentleman's
gentleman. But that is totally. I like the dude kind of when you read about him, because he's just the most. Like, he is the most positively British general you can imagine for the American Revolution. Like, you hear stories about their leadership like that, and you're like, one, no wonder they lost. Two, like, they handled it really well. Like, yeah. They are the classiest buffoons to ever take up arms.
But seriously, it does point out, we've talked about it before. A couple weeks ago, we talked about the Canadian soldier in World War II and Korea, I think it was. But it's really easy, especially like in the age of video games, to be like, oh, the British were the bad guys, and forget that they're humans too, and a lot of them were good people. Yeah. Like,
any takeaway from, like, you know, any war stories, like, you can find, as much as you don't even want to think about it, because, you know, the Nazis regime was so fucking evil, there are probably German stories there that are not, I'm not going to say heroic, but painfully human, you know?
Yeah, sure. Well, like I said, it would be very naive to say every single German soldier during World War II was a piece of shit, like, whatever.
I mean, because you know, not to get too political, but it's like, you can fucking make the case that, like, a lot of our military fights in causes that are not just and okay. Right. And it doesn't make those men and women in military, you know, evil, but it, you know, it's that thing. It's really interesting in history to like see things through the big picture and be like, okay, this country was totally fucking in the wrong there. But then you can, like, zoom in and be like, but here's some of the stories of the people within that and what they were doing and how they were reacting to it all.
And it's just way too simple to be like, well, but their side was wrong. They should have never agreed to fight. And it's like, well, it's easy to say.
I mean, I don't disagree with that. But it's also like, that's also never happened in the history of nations. Like, there's always people who, for one reason or another, will fight or have to fight.
Right.
And then there are guys like this who, just like he apparently just wanted to meet people.
I can travel the world and wine and dine every wife I find.
Yeah. I want to believe that, like, as sociable and shit as he was, though, he was just sleeping with Benedict Arnold's wife. Like, that was the only woman that, like, he fucking even bothered to, like, care about. Like,
or like we find out he wasn't even having like an affair with her. They just got along really well. They were good friends.
Yeah. That's probably what it was, and we just, in our sick fucking way, we just slowly did.
We can't imagine a man and a woman just being friends. There had to be more to it.
Right. But I want to believe that the whole meeting was like, it was 2 seconds of exchanging papers and then like just talking about, like, you talk to her a lot, dude. I'm not saying you can't be friends. I'm just saying you shouldn't write her all the time,
Well, that's what it was. He gave him the papers on the fort, and he was like, "Oh, can you give this letter to your wife?" And he's like, "What?"
Well, it's just a thank you, for setting all this up. But it's just like you should not be writing my wife more than I write her. Okay, just to be clear. No, I'm not going to help you.
There was nothing sexual going on. It was just like, look, you're too nice to her. And you're making me look bad. Fucking stop it. Right. I don't want to put more effort into this thing.
No, I'm not going to help you get a ship. You get back on your own. All right. So yeah, that's Major John André. Good man, friend of all.
Friend of everyone. It sounds like.
Well, friend of your white. It doesn't say if he. I doubt he hung out with too many Native Americans.
That's another thing that's important to keep in mind. It's like, he was such a good guy. Incredibly racist, though.
Yeah, we say, like, yeah, he's pretty likable. I somehow miss, like, the 5 articles. Like, here's all the slaves he had.
Anyway. My story is something completely different.
That's good. It would suck if it was exactly the same.
One of these weeks it'll happen, but
hopefully episode 50.
The big one, we like build it up. We're like, all right, everybody, this week's gonna be great. And you'll start on your topic, and I'll just be sitting here going, "Oh, fuck."
What would be really fucked up is if we make episode 50 the day we like do our own creepypastas, and we somehow write the same one,
same story. I was thinking about that. It's because we like to like do our production meetings on the show during the show. I was thinking that might be a good topic for episode 50.
It just came into my mind now, but I think I'm all for that idea. So.
I just can't decide if it would be better if we like wrote our own stories and then read them to each other, or if we wrote stories and then like you had to read my story and I had to read yours. Like that way we still get that interpretation. Like when we do it off the internet. I don't know.
That would make me feel so bad, which means we should probably do it that way.
We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So every spring, beginning in 2011, so way back, 8 years ago, the people of Detroit, Michigan celebrate the Marche du Nain Rouge, a celebration in which parade goers in costume, meant to obscure their identity in order to avoid future retribution, symbolically drive out a creature known as the Red Gnome. At the end of the celebration... Yes. I've never heard of Red Gnome marshmallows, but maybe that's...
Well, I heard Marche du Rey or whatever.
The Marche du Nain Rouge. It's French because, Detroit people are French.
For hit that red fuck with marshmallows.
At the end of the celebration, an effigy of the gnome is destroyed, thus banishing the evil entity for another year. Although also a pair of groups calling themselves the Friends of the Nain Rouge and We Are Nain Rouge also appear at the celebration in a mock counter-protest, claiming that the city's problems shouldn't be blamed on this creature and that the already falling population of Detroit can't afford to drive out any more residents, let alone one of its oldest. Which is hilarious to me, because it's all of this is obviously meant in good fun, but I don't know whose idea it was to be like, we're going to come up with this this tradition where we symbolically drive out this creature, and somebody else is like, well, we're going to protest that. So, what the hell is the Nain Rouge? The legend of the Red Gnome, or Nain Rouge in French, dates back to the 1700s, sort of, but I'll get to that. In 1763, Captain James Dalyell of the British Army, along with 58 of his officers, were followed along the banks of the Detroit River by a small creature clad in red. The figure was misshapen, with a mouth full of pointy teeth and a very red face and piercing eyes. So the soldiers were, of course, terrified of the creature, and they opened fire on it, but to no avail. Later, they met up with an old trapper from the area, and the trapper told them that what they had seen was a supernatural entity known as the Nain Rouge, and that those who see the creature would soon face misfortune. And misfortune the soldiers did soon face, because not long after that encounter, Captain Dalyell and his men were ambushed by a Native American chief Pontiac, and the entire party was slaughtered. The battle was so bloody that it is said that the river tributary where they had met their demise ran red with blood for days after the battle. It's even claimed that the Red Gnome was seen dancing among the bodies in the battle's aftermath.
See, all in good fun.
Mm-hmm. That's what it's funny to me, because when I hear the term Red Gnome, I immediately think of that terrible 80s or early 90s cartoon David the Gnome, which, if you haven't seen it, was about this gratingly wise and caring gnome, and it was just the worst show and the worst theme song. It's it's kind of like the Veggie Tales of the early 90s, where of course every episode had to have some deep moral whatever.
And much like VeggieTales, it ended in a bloodbath.
Right. I think the show only got a single season, but Nickelodeon had a habit of rerunning things just over and over again, and it made it feel like it lasted a decade. But anyway, I like to think that this grandpa-ish gentle gnome was just skipping along when the soldiers opened fire on him. So when they got slaughtered a couple days later, he was so delighted that they were dead that he was dancing on their entrails. Anyway, like the trapper, many of the residents of Detroit were familiar with the legend of the Red Gnome. Decades before Captain Dalyell and his men fell afoul of the creature, a prominent resident and actual founder of Detroit, Antony de la Moth Cadillac. Cadillac's the only word I can fucking say out of his name.
I like how all these are a Pontiac, Cadillac. It's it's just cars.
Well, and it's all happened around Detroit, so that's how it's hey, I just figured out where they got the names for these stupid cars. Anyway, this Cadillac guy,
the Red Gnome car did not last very long.
No, because anybody that saw it got screwed.
The new Dodge Gnome. It chug-a-chugs at 16 miles per hour.
Don't look, though. Anyway, the founder of Detroit, this Cadillac guy, had seen the gnome, and shortly afterwards he lost both his fortune and his political standing. In 1805, many residents began seeing the gnome. Shortly after the sightings began, a fire broke out at or near local baker John Harvey's stables. A barn was the first to go, and the blaze quickly spread to the surrounding buildings. Many of the city's 600 residents quickly formed a bucket brigade. I think most of us know what that is, but there was no official fire department or firefighting equipment, so they literally had to do that thing.
Just a bunch of assholes with some water and
passing buckets back and forth. This will stop it.
Yeah.
But because the city was built basically entirely out of wood, by noon the next day the entire city had burnt to the ground.
And the bucket brigade was still trying. Bless them.
Well, they switched to buckets of beer, and they were all just drinking.
So you're telling me you see this thing, you fucking get catastrophic luck?
Mm-hmm.
So, like, maybe I saw it when I was, like, a baby or something, and that just explains how I got here.
Your mom didn't know the consequences, so she decorated the nursery with red gnomes.
Oh, look, he likes them.
Anyway, yeah, literally in 1805, the entire city of Detroit burned to the ground, with the exception of a single stone fort, and a few of the stone chimneys from the destroyed buildings were just like you would see out of basically a cartoon or a movie or something, where there's just smoking piles of ash and like a couple rickety chimneys still like standing. But nobody died, so there's that. That's a pretty good accomplishment when your entire city burns to the ground, but nobody dies.
And the gnome's like trying to dance, but he's like, "Fuck, there's nothing to step on."
It's hot. That's how coal walking was invented, actually. Yeah. During the War of 1812, while General William Hull held the city for the British, a number of men spotted the gnome in the thick night. I put smog, but I meant fog, because there were no cars back then. Even Hull himself reported seeing the creature. And shortly after, Hull was forced to surrender the city.
See, I'm not... That I call bullshit on that. Like, there is no fucking, like, bad luck for, like, basic war shit happening in a war.
No, he had it until the gnome came along. It's like, fuck.
That's like sports superstition. Like, we would have been fine if that fucking crazy crap hadn't come out. And, like...
I still maintain that the Indians would have won the World Series against the Cubs if it hadn't have had that rain delay.
Yeah.
There on Game 7. Yeah. And that's not superstition. That's science, damn it. Fucking Cubs.
Yeah. And their fucking rain.
Given the history of sudden disaster and the fact that all the victims were said to have seen the creature shortly before their respective downfalls, the Nain Rouge had become a very well-known and feared legend in and around Detroit. And of course, history suggests that the legend of the gnome dates far before these like documented cases, and that the creature was actually well known among the area's Native American inhabitants as well.
But we just call him asshole.
Right? Like,
I would love if, like, for like the natives, like, there's just a really like mild, like, common, like, yeah, he's just a prick.
Oh, that's Bill.
Yeah, don't look at him. He gets a bug up his ass and tries to fuck with you.
Yeah, he's just a dick. Yeah.
You try to ignore him.
So though nobody knows for sure when the tales of the creature's pathetic appearances began, the tale starts to come to an end sometime in the year 1857, when rumors began circulating that 2 hunters had finally slain the gnome. So apparently after like having shot the creature multiple times, they stuck it to a tree using their bayonets just to make sure it didn't, come back to life and escape. And then the body was packed in salt for flavor, I guess. Yeah. Like...
because we never waste what we kill.
The superstitious townsfolk, many of whom had grown up hearing the stories of the creature, if not having seen its destructive aftermath firsthand, were eager to have the body burned, but while they were building the bonfire, a man approached the hunters and offered them an undisclosed amount of money for the body. So, like, killing hellspawn is good, but money is better, and the trappers took that offer. The body was eventually sold to a collector of oddities in Liverpool, England. And so on 1858, the body was pickled and sealed in a barrel, because that's what you do, and placed among the bushels of corn and parcels of stained glass in the hull of a brig known as the Black Hawk. So this is the point in the story where I expected the ship to like mysteriously vanish at sea, or maybe for like another ship to come across the Black Hawk only to find the crew mysteriously dead and the barrel like missing or empty. But that's not what happens. Instead, the Black Hawk makes the journey to London in one piece, and the gnome is delivered as instructed to the buyer's address at 25 Clarence Street. However, I can tell the dog's waiting for the... Yeah, it's like, what happens next? I hear a salted gnome is in the mix.
She actually moved up to computer, like really, really intently.
So
Tell
the
me about
buyers,
the gnome.
it delivered to 25 Clarence Street, where it was being mailed to. But as it turns out, London featured not one or two, but rather 3 roads by the name of Clarence Street. Because that makes sense when you're planning a fucking city. And the 25 Clarence Street to which the barrel was delivered was not the address of warehouse keeper Michael Connolly, who was supposed to receive the shipment, but rather the home of jeweler Abraham Harris. So Harris was horrified to find a disfigured gnome corpse when he opened the barrel.
Ah.
Yeah, like, all right, my diamonds came in. What the fuck is this? Let me
I'm
taste
your
it.
diamond.
This is too goddamn salty. Who the fuck prepared
As
this?
delicious as this is not what I ordered.
So he resealed the barrel and placed it in the cellar, but when he returned with a colleague later that night, they found the lid of the barrel laying on the floor and the body missing.
Why do you bring a call? Like, look, is this a diamond?
It doesn't look like a diamond to me, but, I'm drunk.
But I'm drunk. I need your expertise.
So either the body was stolen or the gnome had escaped. Apparently it's the latter, because the Nain Rouge was said to have been seen just prior to Detroit's 1967 riots, where people took to the street, and I would say in protest, but I mean it was riot, flat out, police brutality, race, that fun stuff that we still have going on because we don't learn. In 1977, linemen working for the Edison Company saw the creature climbing up a utility pole. They yelled at it to get down, because when you see a red fucking gnome climbing a pole, the first thing you're worried about is it getting electrocuted. So it scampered almost to the top and then came back down and ran off. The next day, a historic ice storm hit the city, and more than 400,000 people were left without power. So I don't know if apparently took it like 200 years to swim back from London to Detroit, but it appeared to have made it back home at some point. So the first written account of the Nain Rouge comes from a book called Legends of Le Detroit, a collection of folklore, genealogy, and family narratives written by Detroit folklorist Marie Caroline Watson Hamlin in 1883. Which is 30 years after the supposed death of the creature, or the disappearance of the creature. The collection includes more than 30 folk tales from Detroit's early history, as well as folk tales from the French and the Native Americans of the area. It seems unlikely that there would be this number of sightings preceding tragic events of such magnitude, but no written accounts would appear until, her book. It's also unlikely that there's a magic red fucking gnome running around causing bad luck to people. It was mentioned that Detroit's founder, Antoine de la Mothe Cadillac, had seen the gnome before his financial and political downfall, like I talked about earlier. Cadillac was indeed charged with abuses of power, and his governorship over Detroit was taken away. However, he was then rewarded governorship over the French territory that would eventually become Louisiana, which seems like a promotion to me.
Unfortunately, there are millions of red gnomes under the surface of it.
We heard you survived the Red Gnome. We've got a mission for you.
You're the only one that can tame this land.
He would die in France like 20 years after, having Detroit taken away from him at the age of 72. So it doesn't sound like his demise was much of a demise. William Hull and his men that were first to surrender the city during the War of 1812, that actually happened. Only Hull was only in Detroit because he had been forced to retreat there after he made a clumsy attempt at invading Canada, and that proved to be a mistake. So even if there is a such thing as a psychic gnome, you wouldn't have needed one to foresee his failure in Detroit. Which is, I had to kind of bite my tongue when you said that about the war stuff. It's like, yeah, it turns out he was just a shitty general.
It's just, it's shit I've heard before is like an author who dived into a lot of like 1800s war stories was Ambrose Bierce. Yeah. And I've always been a fan of his short stories. But there are some of them that are just like, here's some spooky shit that happens. Like, okay, what you're telling me in 50 pages is that a dude got shot. a ghost didn't make that happen. Like that's just a war.
And you could certainly say the same thing about the men that were slaughtered by Chief Pontiac. They were at war. That was a thing that happened. Yeah. And I'd imagine if you're marching through who knows if they actually had even seen anything, but say they thought they had, if you're marching through like enemy territory, just firing your guns randomly, that's basically like saying, hey, we're over here. Like, seems like they might not have been the most trustworthy soldiers.
Yeah.
So yeah, basically everything that was attributed to the gnome is just regular shit that happened.
But if there's enough there, you can make a really fucking bad horror movie out of it.
Sure.
And you should.
Right. And just call it Red Gnome.
Well, make it French. The
Nain Rouge.
The Nain Rouge.
I'm probably saying that wrong. I'm very not familiar with French pronunciation of stuff.
When in doubt, don't pronounce the last letter in every word.
Nain Rogue.
Rouge is right.
Yeah, I know Rouge. That's like the one word everybody in the world knows, but...
Yeah, well, and people know noir, but...
yeah, that's true.
It's also noir.
Or oui.
Yeah, I really should get back to trying to learn French, because I took it in college and liked it, but I lost all of it.
It's just cool learning languages, but I suck at it. But anyway... In an interesting side note, since the start of the city's parades in 2011 and the mock banishment of the gnome, Detroit's economy has actually started to see an uptick, which is obviously because the gnome has been defeated rather than, the fact that a city that has an economy that's starting to come back can now afford to spend time having random-ass festivals.
Yeah.
Causality, it goes either way, whatever way sounds more interesting.
I mean, festivals will, can generate some good buzz for businesses and shit, but yeah, you're right, like
generally the festival itself is the sign that the economy is starting to do better,
because if people don't have money, they're not going to go to your fucking party,
right,
where you charge them,
so that's what I got this week. It was just a random...
I
just love the idea of this, like, and it's like the least they try to make it intimidating. They're like pointy teeth. It's like, okay, but you said he's a tiny gnome.
I like your version of like monster stories because, like, for mine, I just sort of leave people hanging, or it's like, and yeah, people believe this shit, but you'll be like, and everything I just said isn't true.
Yeah, I'm a buzzkill. It's like, oh no! Speaking of buzzkill, my phone just started buzzing. How about that?
Is it
and I killed it. Yeah. So. It's a short story this week, but it's longer than the one I started. I had another topic that I'll do eventually, but I was like, this will be an easy topic. It's really interesting. And I got to like the end of page 1, and it's really fucking hard to find information on.
Yeah.
It's like, son of a bitch.
Yeah, I mean, it's, that's why we're talking openly about like making our own content. It turns out it's fine. It's hard to find stories that can fill an hour.
It is.
But that's fine,
So come back next week when our format changes to 20 minutes total, 10 minutes each.
The non-essential soundbite. We really wanted to change our format. It's such a fast-paced world out there. We really wanted to make sure our listeners weren't bogged down with too much content.
Welcome to the Non-Essential Podcast. In 1887, Bill burned down his neighbor's house.
So
Come back next week.
So we actually have 2 minutes of stories, 37 minutes of advertising. And we think this model is really going to help. Talk about how well we slept
and how we normally go to bed.
And John André wrote to George Washington and said, I really don't mind being hanged as long as I can have a delicious Coke Zero before. But yeah, we'll be back next week with more stuff to make you smarter. That's what we do.
Yeah.
We're teachers. We're basically teachers. Anyway,
I'll maintain we're the podcast to listen to if you're still in school and you have a class where you just have to do like random reports.
Yeah, if you want to bullshit, like just write down exactly what we say.
Shit, we even give you the sources in the episode description. So.
Yeah, you're covered. And if it's a book, we even cite that shit proper.
Right.
Unless they want like APA instead of MLA or whatever the fuck. That shit's always stupid. Tell your teachers that's stupid and you'll format it however you want.
This is formatted in the Steve style.
Guarantee you'll get 10 more points credit for standing up for yourself.
Right. So
yeah. Goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.